Welcome back to Health and Wellbeing, working on mental health. This is the fourth in a four-parter of interconnected aspects. These four techniques are things that I have used in the past that I found useful and very helpful in coping with some of those thought processes that can really destroy your capability of functioning in the world because there's something negative in there that's just eating away at your strength. A quick review: the first one we did was penny for your thoughts, and it's keeping tally on negative thoughts, just kind of keeping a running total to really see that they're distinct moments that are negative and not a whole day that's negative. And the second one was the captain's log, and that was keeping a sort of a diary of what you were doing, where you were, and whatnot when you had those negative thoughts. You don't have to know what the thoughts were, but what you were doing, where you were, and those types of things, so that you can kind of start to identify things that are triggering those negative thoughts. And when you have those thoughts, identifying when they happen and what may be instigating those thoughts, it allows you to selectively choose which ones you will avoid for a little while you concentrate your effort on overcoming one of them. And once you've sort of pulled that one down to a dull roar, you can then pull another one in and work through that one while the others are at recess. And you just kind of work your way through them one at a time to get some control. And then the third one we had was Stop Picking on Me, which was keeping track of what those negative thoughts were and being able to then respond to them as if you were responding to a friend who is receiving those negative thoughts from a bully. So if you can defend your imaginary friend or if you imagine a loved one or a favorite fictional character being on the receiving end of those negative statements from somebody else, if you're able to defend them from them, why can't you defend yourself from yourself? And so you'd write down the arguments, the negative statements, and then argue in defense of anybody who would be on the receiving end of that, and then really kind of try to take those to heart as you defending yourself from your own negative thoughts. And the final one here is I'm going to call voice recognition. And it's really kind of trying to come down to the root of where these thoughts come from. Because as we have these negative thoughts, I have found, at least in my case, oftentimes they come in a voice that, while it's my internal voice saying it at this point, it's mimicking what I've heard in the past. So, more often than not, the voice that is belittling me or causing me to fear change and struggle and make me worry about things is, when I really examine it, it'll have the underpinnings of somebody else I learned to think that way from. So in some people's cases, it's a parent who said negative things, or somebody they grew up with and considered a friend who was always kind of picking on them, but it was okay, we were friends. But we've internalized some of those ways of talking about ourselves from people who talked about us in negative ways. But it's not always just how people talked to us or about us. Sometimes it's observing your grandparents, how they talk to your parents. Sometimes it's observing how a friend talked to another classmate. And so when you start to get to a point in your life where you have aspects of your own self that you feel like might be vulnerable to those same voices from other people, we sometimes internalize that way of talking about those situations. So where, like, instead of looking at your relationship with your friend who was a bully to some other kid, we look at those aspects of ourselves and say things like, you know, that would be such a wussy thing to do. But it's not really us saying that. It's the way our friend talked about other people. We've internalized that as we got used to that being the way you talk about those types of situations. So when you find yourself in that situation, that's the way you're supposed to talk about it. That's how you learn to talk about it with other people. And so now that's how you talk about yourself. So you see your grandparents and parents and siblings and friends, co-workers and fans of the same music or pop culture sources as you learn to talk about things in a certain way. And sometimes you'll find those voices that you learn to talk in turned back towards yourself. And so being able to track down where those thought processes come from and kind of realize that this is something I learned. This is a way of talking to and about people that I learned from somebody else. This is not how I necessarily feel, and it's not the only way to talk about this topic, this part of me that I need to talk about, or this thing about how I feel about myself. This is not the only way to talk about myself. And so once you start to kind of really realize that this is somebody else's way of talking about these things and I don't have to be that way, it makes it easier to really kind of come to terms with how you think and talk about yourself. And it makes it easier to overcome some of those anxiety attacks or the depression about your past or things you feel make you worthless. And I mean, I don't have all of these problems, but I've talked with some other people about those types of feelings, and this kind of being able to pick apart, this isn't me saying this. This is me using things I learned from other people who say things like this, and I don't have to continue to do that. This is somebody else's opinion. This is somebody else's way of talking about this topic, and I don't want to do it anymore. It's super helpful sometimes to be able to do that, and it lets you be the one who decides how you're going to handle those aspects of yourself and your life. So hopefully there's some ideas in there that are helpful to you. I know I've had some success with most of these. They're not always going to be perfect, but they should be at least helpful in some way. And I will see you for another episode in a week. Take care of yourselves.